No kid's Jewish education should end at 13. Adjerba offers Ontario high school credits infused with Jewish learning online for teens across the province. Ministry approved, intellectually demanding, Jewishly transformative. Adjerba.ca. That's ADRABA.ca. Your teen belongs here.
I'm just looking for the window that I have the Torah in. Sorry, folks.
The Torah is in every window.
That's also true. Okay, here it is.
The Toronto community is under fire. Multiple synagogues have been victimized by acts of violence, and people are asking for increased vigilance and a better community response. But what could that look like? We discuss this issue and its ramifications, and Tucker Carlson put Chabad in his crosshairs. We discuss his latest conspiracy theory and how it is affecting the community. And stick around for textual healing as we finish the book of Shemot. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are not in heaven. Yedida, welcome back.
It's good to be back. I missed you, but I think you guys covered it without me. So thanks for holding down the fort.
We missed you for sure. We hope everything is okay on your end.
So I'll just say, I'll make a public service announcement and maybe remind us to announce this in the weeks leading up to Purim. Raisins, my friends, are toxic to dogs. And Argos got into some raisins, and there was an emergency trip to the vet. Argos is our Greek-named dog. So anyway, I think he's fine. He will live to ingest more food he should not eat.
And why did you pick Argos? I need to know this now.
So, nerds that we are, Argos was the name of Odysseus's dog, who after Odysseus is gone for 20 years, right? He goes off to the Trojan War, fights the war for 10 years, and then spends 10 more years coming back. Argos is his beloved, devoted dog who waits by the window for him for those 20 years. And then Odysseus gets home and he's in disguise, but the dog obviously immediately recognizes his master, wags his tail, and then dies. And that is Argos' namesake.
Yeah. But there's no indication whether or not it was Raisins that did that Argos in or anything like that. It's just your Argos had a close call with Raisins.
Excitement to see Odysseus again. So that was not this Argos's fate either, thank God.
We have a cat named Moses, Mo for short.
Nice.
So, anyway, it's good to hear that Argos is on the mend, and I guess no raisins in your Shalach Manas.
I have removed all of the raisins in an effort to protect this dog from himself.
Yeah, the circle of life.
I had one of those days last week.
Okay.
I had a really true circle. This happens when you're a rabbi. It happened to me a few times. But my sister had a baby.
Mazel tov.
Thanks. It was really great. A baby boy, wonderful. And then last week, after we taped, we had the bris at night, which went well. My brother-in-law has basically only non-Jewish friends. So this was a first experience for a lot of them. And the way my sister's house is, they kind of had it in a room where there's a sunken living room and gallery seating. So they're all standing up there almost like it was an observation room at for a procedure. But as there's the Moyle is doing a good job of explaining what he's doing. But then when he gets going, he can't really talk. He's kind of, focused. So my sister said to me, when he gets quiet, you need to do some, vintage Rabbi Matthew play-by-play. Color commentary for the bris. So I made some Seinfeld jokes about the Seinfeld bris. And anyway, everything went great. A lot of these people came up to me afterwards and were like, once it all started, we were glad you were talking because we focused on you and not what was going on. I was like, that was a good idea. That was probably a good idea. But the circle of life thing was that a few hours before that, an elderly fellow whose wedding I did just a few years ago was in the hospital. And I visited him, and it was kind of at the end. And then a couple days after that, he passed away. So it was kind of very tough moment in the afternoon. Couple of hours later, the complete other end of the spectrum. And I just offer that up as everybody's job gives them something. And this is an interesting something, this circle of life totally. Within that span, right? Is so interesting.
Yeah. Let's move on to our topics for the day. And the first thing on our minds is that the Toronto Jewish community was rocked over the weekend when 2 synagogues were attacked in the early hours of Shabbat morning. There was drive-by shootings. This comes in the wake of a third shul being hit very similarly overnight on Purim. So we have over Shabbat, there was the Bait in Thornhill, there was Shari Shemayim at Bathurst and Lawrence, right on Glencairn. And on Purim, it was Temple Emmanuel, one of the large Reform congregations. There was a press conference at the Bait on Shabbat. Outside. It wasn't being run by the Bait. Shari Shemayim there was a press conference there on Sunday. Everybody from the prime minister on down, they've all come out against this and saying that everyone has a right to pray and to be in religious spaces in peace. The community is saying the things that they are always saying after these situations, right? Increased funding for security, armed guards at synagogues and other community spaces. I guess my first question to bring up, because this is something that I started thinking about after hearing all of this, was what are we really asking for? Because what can be done to prevent these types of really terrible things from happening?
I'm glad you asked it like that, because that's a good way of putting what I wonder every time too. Like, we can't not have these press conferences, and we can't not have people saying these things. I think we would look almost ridiculous if we didn't. But I don't really know. Like, do people feel safer because the prime minister on down says this is terrible? I don't know. I just like the question, and it leaves me wondering, how do we translate this into some kind of feeling that will make people feel like safer? How do we translate this into people feeling safer? I don't know.
Feeling safer, I think, would be a function of actually being safer. So my question is, what can be done to actually make the community safer? And, my parents, Shar Shemayim is my parents' shul. When my family comes back to Toronto, that's where we go. Very familiar to us. But when you're walking up Bathurst Street towards Glencairn, there are police in the Bialik parking lot. There's security in front of the shul. I think that the police presence in the Bialik parking lot is there 100% of the time. There is an increased police presence that has not served as enough of a deterrent. So, asking questions, what would actually be a deterrent here? And a deterrent to what, right?
That's right.
Synagogue in the dark of night is an act of terror. It's meant to make Jews feel uncomfortable and unsafe and unwelcome on behalf of the perpetrators of it, who are not necessarily representative of, general Canadian sentiment. I don't know, if there's really anything, nothing can 100% protect the Jewish community. So what would get us to a place where the Jewish community is safer? And I'm not a security expert. I suspect that there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that we don't hear about.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is. And I'm sure that the police are doing everything that they can. But what you're saying, I think is 100% true. There is no way to prevent everything from happening, right? There's no way to make sure that you will never feel unsafe. You're not going to have police 24 hours a day, right, at every corner of every synagogue in order to make sure that these things don't happen, and of every school. And then in front of every individual Jew as they're walking down the street with a Magen David, because they have the right to do that and they have the right to not be harassed, right? At some point, as we say in the rabbinic world, im kain ein ladavar sof, right? At some point, there is no limit to what you can say that I need this in order for my protection. You say that this is an act of terrorism. And I definitely see this as an act of vandalism. It is a horrible thing to do to a community or space, to go and shoot it up, or as happened in Montreal, to throw a Molotov cocktail at it. Every single instance of this happens overnight when it is clear that nobody is there, and when the people... I see Yadira shaking her head, so I'm going to give her the chance to respond to this. It's clear when nobody is there, and when this is not designed to actually cause harm to people, but to cause the threat of harm, and to tell people, look, we can do this. And I wonder how we have to react to that and say to ourselves, it's not good. It's horrible that these things are happening to our buildings. But does that make us any less safe?
Can I ask, Yadira, before you jump in, because I'm somewhere in the middle between that opinion and what I'm guessing is your opinion based on what your face said. But what I was going to ask right before you said that, Avi, is Kristallnacht, they were out to burn synagogues down, to haul off Jews in the middle of the night. They went after people. Does this feel like a precursor to that? Or does this feel like not that, I get pulled in both directions. I get pulled like they're just being very cowardly and trying not to actually hurt anyone, to try and play mind games almost and scare us, versus they're going to do this until they realize that they can do more, and then it's going to become not as bad, hopefully, or God forbid, as Australia, but something more than just us being able to say in the middle of the night. I get pulled. So I want to – sorry, Edith, I want to hear what you said.
I think that this is escalating, and I think that that's the concern. I think it's, it starts with graffiti, and then it's gunshots during the night, and then it's something worse. Right, like we talked a few weeks or months ago when the synagogue in Winnipeg was graffitied, the person who was doing that, if I recall correctly, was painting symbols of different kinds of hate, right? Like there was Islamophobic graffiti also around the same time, and there also was, like, I think some established mental illness. Right, like anti-Semitism isn't in the DSM as an established mental illness, though, maybe that's where this should go. But I think that the concern, and I think it's valid, of Jewish leaders and community members is, it starts small. It's like the broken windows theory, right? Like you have to paint over the graffiti and repair the windows because otherwise things just keep getting worse and worse. And I think that, and I'm not an expert in, the years leading up to the massacre at Bondi Beach over Hanukkah, but I think that there's a valid concern that, something like that is next. And that in both places, the communities have been asking for some kind of like response or deterrent or increased security. And, it's met with bureaucracy and process and platitudes, which leads me to two things. One is that nobody else is going to protect Jews the way Jews are going to protect Jews. So, calls for not necessarily for like Jews to take up arms and there are very strict gun laws, but for Jews to take care of their own security and not rely on the police in ways that like strengthen and harden is the word, the community in visible ways, I think would be meaningful. And we want the government to come save us, right? We're Canadian. We want to believe that our tax dollars are providing us with services, but we've seen, especially over the last few years, but also longer, that like those tax dollars are funding, education that isn't teaching Jewish history the way that like we would like it to be taught, for one thing. And the second thing I'll just say, and like, I hate that this is true. And I hate that, as a historian, I'm going to say this because I don't accept it, right? Like I'm saying it, I'm not accepting it, but I'm stating it as a fact. Like this is a part of the Jewish experience. And like, we're naive to think that like, it's ever not going to be like this. Yep. It's built in.
That's a good argument too. That's a very, very good argument.
Your broken windows theory. You patch up the windows, you make the neighborhood look nice again. You do that in a way to prevent future things from setting and really taking place. I feel like by calling attention to the anti-Semitism over and over and over and over again, we're doing the opposite. We're leaving the windows broken and reminding everybody that anti-Semitism exists. If anything, and this is messages that I've been seeing, Sheryl Sandberg talked about it this past weekend at one of these big conferences, that the anti-Semitism movement hasn't worked. By calling attention to it, we've actually just made people be aware that anti-Semitism exists and given them the opportunity to do more of it. So on that sense, I don't think we're doing the broken windows theory very right. And on the other sense of like, well, making sure that it doesn't escalate to the point where there's actually attacks, I don't think there's anything you can do to prevent that. Because if somebody wants to do that, they are going to do that.
I think that there's truth there. And I think also, right, the anti-Semitism piece is, I guess, akin to the argument that like, Holocaust education has failed, right? Like the reason to embrace Jews and not be an anti-Semite is not because the Holocaust happened, right? Like the reason to embrace Jews is because they're people just like you. But like it's baked into Western culture. I mean, we're seeing it, it's rearing its ugly head in all the ways that it does on the left and on the right and in conspiratorial thinking. And like, we had a break from it, it seems. There were like a few decades that were great. And here we are.
Here's my question about that. do we have to sort of accept that there's going to be a certain amount of anti-Semitism given the state of the world today, given that Israel is in the crosshairs and Jews associate themselves with Israel very readily and rightfully so, and that if Israel is doing something which some people perceive as questionable, then you kind of have to accept that at the end of the day, somebody's going to not like it, and somebody who doesn't like it might actually act out on it. It's part of what we're dealing with in the world today.
Don't you just see it as like, but like 500 years ago, it was everywhere. Like it was the same thing. Don't you just see Israel as like the latest version of the?
Well, you're both accepting the premise that Israel's behavior is the reason people are anti-Semitic, and I don't accept that.
No, I'm not saying that. I am saying that there are people who hang their anti-Semitism in today's day and age on that. And because Israel is a world player on the stage, at the end of the day, there is this big thing in the world right now called Israel, which is doing things which many rational people say has morally dubious, things that are going on. Then
why are you coming to shoot up my synagogue? One does not follow the other.
You are right.
Right.
It is not.
But reject the premise.
But it could still be how they're operating, even if it doesn't make any sense.
If there is hatred in the world, there are always going to be people that are going to act.
Explain it away.
Fine, let's take your premise, and I'll say, if that's the case, then there's nothing that we're going to do to prevent these shootings from happening.
Well, that's not
because
entirely
there's always
true.
going to be somebody.
That's not entirely true. Like, I think we talked about this a little bit with Australia. Australia reacts to the Bondi Beach thing by saying, our already tough gun laws need to get tougher. Like, if you don't want crimes of any kind associated with guns, you got to get rid of the guns. Right? Like that's something that they could be doing. That's a thing. That's a real solution. It's not the Jewish directly thing, but it's part of it, isn't it? Like if you want to see a response from government.
But it's treating Bondi as a random act of gun violence, right? Like one of the things I've heard from my family is that some of the police response has likened this or responded to it as if this was a random act of violence. And this is not a random act of violence. This is not random. Right? This is not a stabbing on a bus.
But then again, nothing is random and everything is random, right? Any act of violence has its core, has its root in something that the person doesn't like. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like my teachers, and therefore you have to protect all teachers to prevent school shootings.
Is there's no response and you can't do anything and just keep calm and carry on.
We need to be vigilant. And I think what you put up as an idea that like as Jews, we're the only ones that can really take care of ourselves. That should be something. I've noticed that in Montreal, the security network that is run internally by the Jewish community makes sure that there is somebody very competent at every doorway, at every entrance to every shul on every Shabbat morning that is there to put eyes on everybody that's walking in, along with the security guard who's a hired, muscle. And I'm told that in Toronto, it's not the same thing, that you have elderly people that are there for quote unquote security, and they're not really able to do anything. And I'm not, pointing fingers. I don't know exactly what's going on there. But yeah, we need to have a more internal process where we go and say, look, you care about this stuff, devote X number of hours a week towards this, towards your school's well-being, towards your shul's well-being, and make sure that this isn't there. You want to have 24-hour security? There's how many members are at Shari Shamayim? How many members are at the Bayit? Set up a weekly watch. Right? Your job should be for 2 hours to patrol around every Friday night from 12 to 2, and then somebody else gets from 2 to 4, and somebody else gets from 4 to 6, and then that's, do that if you care. We're going to take care of ourselves.
There's something to that.
I don't think that people want to be patrolling the streets in the middle of the night, but there's lots of...
Why not?
Again,
in Israel, they do that.
I am not that's true. But people who, moved to Bathurst and Eglinton weren't planning on doing that with their lives. There are kids who moved to Israel do. I think that there are lots of creative solutions to really make the community more safe. I don't think it's necessarily patrol cars. I don't want to resign. I don't want to give the impression that the government and the police officers are off the hook here because there's nothing they can do, because I don't think that that's true.
But what do you expect them to do, though, more?
I don't think that they should be likening it to a random act of violence, because it's not. right? Recognizing that this was an act of hate and it is meant to terrorize.
Well, I think they're doing that, aren't they? Can't we give them credit for
and
that?
It's not like Kristallnacht where the government is complicit in these actions and saying, let it go. They are getting these people that are doing this stuff. It takes time, but that's what happens in a democracy. Right. And to make sure that the person that is getting punished is actually the person.
I do think that is interesting. I remember a couple of years ago being on the radio after one of the, maybe it was the Pittsburgh shooting in the synagogue. I remember being on the radio and someone saying, are you as worried as like this is a repeat of, 100 years ago or whatever it was at the time? And I said, something that feels different is I don't think there were rabbis on the radio the next day talking about this to a general audience, right? Like, I like Avi's point that the government's not complicit in this. They're up there. That there's something to be said for that. I think for sure there has to be. It's a different time. It's the same story but a different time.
The Jewish community would like to see those words backed up with actions and policy changes and recognition. And Jews have been, these are not usually the positions that I take. I think Jews have been reasonably expressing real feelings of vulnerability based on reality for a long time now, right? Like the Canadian Jewish News partnered with Canaland and did a whole 6-part podcast about that, right? So that's documented. So given that, nobody should be surprised that this is happening. And the question is, how do you keep this from getting worse? And getting up there and saying, we condemn this and we're going to like I do think that the police, if they are really maximizing their efforts to protect the Jewish community, and I have no reason to believe that they're not, great, that's what they should be doing. But how do you a lot of smart, creative people need to get together now and say, okay, we don't want Bondi Beach happening here, and we are on that trajectory. How do we stop that?
I would repeat again, I'm not sure that anybody could actually prevent something like Bondi Beach from happening in Canada or in Australia, because if somebody is crazy and wants to do this, they are going to get to do this.
But at the same time, when I have my Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services at an independent space with 250 people, I can't just say, I don't think I could get away with that answer and not hire police. Like, we hire a couple of police. Like, you have to be reasonable about what your expectation is. Are you trying to be a complete preventative? No, it can't be. But you have to do more than shrug your shoulders, this could happen, let's hope for it. Like, we hire cops. And every synagogue, when I worked at Shared Zedek, there were multiple cops every time we had the high holidays. It's just almost, how could you not, right? And then I think it gets into the situation where you got smaller synagogues and they can't afford it. Like, I'm at a nursing home. There's 200 people who live here. 100 people are Jewish. My boss is saying all the time, where's the money going to come from for us to get a security? Like, we have a security person, but there's levels, right? Like, do they have a gun? What could happen if things really went sideways? Like, these conversations, it's almost like levels. Do you want fake security? Do you want medium security? Do you want real, actual guys with guns? Like, what does it cost? Who funds it? How important is that versus the other things that you're raising money for? Like kosher food, security. Which one's more important? Oh my gosh, these are the conversations.
When you're in a leadership role like that, what do you say to community members who are children of Holocaust survivors? What do you say to kids, right? Teenagers who are old enough to understand and little kids who aren't? Like, how do we talk about this?
I don't know.
I can tell you that the thing that goes through my mind that we shouldn't be doing is what we've been doing so far, which is giving the community this false sense of security, that we got your back, that we have this security network, and that the cops are going to be there and they're going to patrol and we're going to have this, we're going to have that. Like, at some point, we have to be a little more transparent with the community about what we're capable and not capable of doing. Because if the community just assumes that if we throw money at a problem, then the problem's going to go away, then we're always going to assume that somebody's to blame for something happening. And sometimes nobody is to blame for that other than the perpetrator and the dumb things that they read on the internet. I also have to recognize, and as a community, we have to recognize that there is nobody to fight this, that there's no single organization that is the anti-Semitism organization that we get to fight those people, right? It's like going and saying, you don't go protest against sexual predators because there's no organization of sexual predators. You just protect yourself from those people by training and knowing what to look for and what to avoid.
I guess I would lean into all the stories that we tell, like Purim. The story of Purim is supposed to be a story. I mean, we say it every year, so it always loses a little bit of its kind of novelty or whatever, but it's supposed to be a story of the courage of one Jewish person not to give in to fear. Different kind of fear, different circumstance, but we are always celebrating the heroes who stand up. And we shouldn't just bring those stories up when it's convenient. Those should be the stories that we're talking about all the time. If you stay at home, it doesn't change what's going to happen to the synagogue. If, like Avi said, if you want to believe in a place, if you are a part of a congregation and it's a big part of your life, just like if there were some kind of parallel where something else in your life were under attack, I don't think you would run from that. I think you would run to it, and I think you would run to it in a smart way, like not towards a fire necessarily, unless you had like all the water or whatever. But yes, I would want to lean into the people. Like, Jews are resilient. I'll never forget when my wife converted. We're told her family she was converting. Her grandmother, who was a every Sunday churchgoer, Oma, blessed memory, she said, "Heather, you're becoming one of the chosen people, like the people from the Bible who are still around." And I never thought of it like that. Like, we're still around. We're still around. We've lost some people, and they are all tragedies. But the whole of this, of us, is so much bigger that, like, we have thousands of years. We can do this. We have to remind ourselves it's awful that we have to, but we can. We totally can.
I think the message of resilience is really important, and we are entering the season of Pesach. I've been thinking about it since before Purim, and not to be all, lachrymose and all of Jewish history is terrible and always has been and always will be, because that's definitely not my perspective. But like, the liturgy almost trains us to view the Jewish experience also like through this perspective, that in every generation, somebody rises up to hurt us, try to kill us, whatever it is. And, thank God for the moment, it's empty buildings. But I do worry that it may not always be empty buildings.
I want to take that moment and use it as a segue to what we want to talk about next, which is this generation's person that is clearly trying to get at us. And I'm not talking about Ye. I am talking about Tucker Carlson, which we'll get to right after this. Last week, Tucker Carlson went on his program to his millions and millions of followers and talked about how the current war in Iran, with which America and Israel are fighting, that Chabad is orchestrating this religious war.
So how exactly did the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, a military that the U.S. taxpayer pays for, that lots of wealthy Americans send money to friends of the IDF, how did all these guys wind up wearing patches suggesting the point of this war was the destruction of one of the holiest places in Islam and the rebuilding of a temple that is totally anathema to Christianity? Like, how did this happen? And as noted, we have eyes but can't see and ears and can't hear, but this has been going on a long time in public through, in part, the efforts of a group called Chabad, Chabad. And you may know people who give money to Chabad or run into Chabad, super nice people. But what is Chabad exactly? Well, Chabad, you can look it up, is a very old organization, about 250 years old. And Chabad has been pushing in a pretty subtle way, unless you look carefully, for the reconstruction of the Third Temple. And it seems like, from the reading we did recently, that those patches actually came from Chabad. Well, in any case, Chabad is pushing for the building of the Third Temple. But it's not just Hasidic groups from Brooklyn, and it's not just IDF soldiers. There are amazingly a lot of American evangelical leaders, Christian Zionists, whose main point is rebuilding the Third Temple. Now, how could an American Christian or any Christian call for the building of a temple whose inherent presence denies Christ, who said clearly, and Christians believe this, it's a core point of faith, I am the temple. You want to speak to God, you speak through me.
I mean, it's bonkers in some way or another. I guess my first question to you guys is, was this surprising in any way? Was it shocking? Or like, what was your initial reactions to this?
Sadly, no. But like, how do he and was it Candace Owens? Like, where do they?
Yeah, she went and amplified
where do they
his
get their
ideas.
stuff? Like, how do they have any audience? How do they have any credibility? It's not surprising, which is what makes it sadder, I think, for me. Isn't this the most nonsensical thing? Like, you don't even know what to do with it. It's so they've started this war so they can rebuild the third temple. Like,
I mean, hold on. I mean, there are people in the American government who talk like that.
I know,
right? Like there was this clip Hegseth in 2018 who was talking about the third temple,
and it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away, because 1917 was a miracle. 1948 was a miracle. 1967 was a miracle. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
Like, don't the sane people dismiss them as not having credibility? That's my point.
No, because that person is now the Secretary of War, right? In charge of this war.
Sorry.
I'll say that one pattern that scholars of the history of anti-Semitism point out is that typically what Jews are being accused of in any particular moment is a reflection of the majority culture's anxiety. So, Tucker Carlson saying that, it's the Jews who incited this war is it I don't know, you can imagine light reflecting off mirrors. I mean, who started this war? There's been a lot of confusion about that, but it's not Chabad. I'll tell you that. It wasn't Chabad.
I went to the next day, Friday night, I went to the shul that I go to in the neighborhood. It's a small little Chabad shul in the Chabad rabbi's basement of his house. He has this very interesting custom of inviting people before Friday night services, or before Mincha, to have kugel and a l'chaim. In order to entice people to come to Mincha and Kabbalat Shabbat. I'm like, that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Kugel and a whiskey. And I'm sitting there over kugel and a whiskey before Friday night services. And I'm telling the Chabad rabbi, I was like, well, he's not wrong that Chabad wants to build the temple and all the religious sites in Israel to be replaced with Jewish religious sites, especially the most, special of them all. And my Chabad rabbi was like, well, yeah, aren't all Jews? I was like, yeah, most Jews, many Jews. I don't want to get into what Messianism is and all of that with him. But then he goes and he tells me, he goes, you know how many Chabad rabbis? He says he called a friend of his he spoke to that morning who wanted to thank Tucker Carlson because some guy went into the University of Florida Chabad that day where his friend works and gave an $18,000 check because said, you guys are doing good work. And he wants to thank Tucker Carlson because donations are pouring into Chabads around the world. So look, Tucker Carlson
not the intended effect. Yeah.
Yes. Tucker Carlson is an anti-Semite. That's documented. He will find conspiracy theories wherever he wants to see them. That's been documented too. And if he wants to blame the Jews for something he doesn't like, he's going to find a way to do that. Chabad is a visible and very messianic sect, which is readily available and people see them and they're around all the time. I can't imagine that if he went and said, who's responsible for this war in Iran? The Vizhnitzer Hasidim. Or, those Munkach Hasidim, right? Them, you got to go after them because not happening, right? But Chabad is out there, and they are very, very messianic. In all of their printed material and all of their online materials, they talk about rebuilding the temple all the time. They want Mashiach to come. And if you're going to create a conspiracy, which is false, it's not hard to put those things together. So I'm not, it's dumb, it's stupid, but I can see why he picked on Chabad because, yeah, and they're the ones that look the most visibly Jewish in some way or another.
In light of what happened in Australia, it is just so... Can an anti-Semite become more distasteful? It's so distasteful and so wrong. It's just so wrong. I don't even know what to do with it. Everything you're saying makes sense to me, Avi, and I get why he would go after them. But of all the people, Like Yedida said, they didn't start this war. And of all the people, the problem is too many people have a microphone these days. I say this, of course, ironically, since we gave ourselves microphones, or the CJN gave us microphones. But back in the day, it used to be harder to get a column, harder to get a microphone, harder to reach a lot of people and influence their thinking rightly or wrongly. But now everyone can have a TV show from their basement with millions of followers from their phone.
There was lots of anti-Semitic radio back in the day, right?
Of course.
In Detroit. And
yeah,
like,
of course. And that was the big concern. That was
Lionel Grew in Canada and Quebec.
Yeah.
Who got a metro station named after him.
I'm just saying, like, it happened. Of course it happened, but it's easier now. It's easier now. And like, we have to take the microphones away.
I don't know. I kind of think being a TikTok influencer is like a hard job. I don't think I could do it.
You're kidding.
But
You're kidding, right?
No, I couldn't do it. I could not.
Just because you couldn't do it doesn't mean it's a hard job.
Okay, fair enough. But like to establish a following and build your brand, these people have obviously been very successful at that. And maybe it's partly because they identify scapegoats and take the responsibility off the individuals themselves by blaming somebody else, which is, often how we use the Jews. I also think that like Chabad is fundamentally misunderstood, right? Like I think, they're present on campus, people see them and people see them serving specifically this sliver of any kind of campus community or city and like don't understand it. And so it becomes believable because it's fundamentally like for the Jews, right? It's for Jewish kids on campus. And so it's exclusive and it's also mysterious. So like, why do these people dress differently? I think that there is some suspicion of people who are do-gooders all the time. Why are these people like cooking meals for hundreds of children or college kids and entertaining them? And like, what's in it for them, right? Like, I think that is sometimes suspicious to people who don't understand it.
I mean, a counterexample to that is the Sikhs, who are very visible in Canada and who have a big mission of feeding people. They have these food pantries and they're feeding people all the time out of their temples. And do people fear them more than any other specific community because they're Sikh and because they know about this? I don't know.
Are they feeding only Sikh people or are they feeding everybody?
No, everybody.
Right. So that's a difference, right? Chabad's for the Jewish kids on campus.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I'm not like justifying it. I'm not saying that like, oh, it's okay. I'm explaining like why it's easy to like project malevolence onto people who are so obviously different than oneself.
Yeah. So to the people that are trying to convince Tucker Carlson of the wrongness of his arguments, I would say the same thing that we said in the previous segment. There's no purpose in trying to do that because he has his beliefs and he is going to have his conspiracy theories. I feel like our job should just be to say, hey, do you believe in rationality or do you believe in conspiracy theories?
I would counter that by just bringing up, I think it was sociologist Robert Brim. He, has really strong data to show that anybody who has even one real substantive encounter with a Jewish person is far less likely to be anti-Semitic. And so, like, again, that puts the onus on Jews to, like, work out the hatred that is aimed at us and that we suffer from, but that fundamentally, like, exists in somebody else's mind. And we're very few in number, and so that's hard to do. But I think that, nevertheless, having real encounters with people out in the world, we know is good for everybody and reduces hate. And like, I think is fundamental to like the Canadian vision of pluralism and multiculturalism. So there I am being naive. Take it and run.
First of all, I don't think you're being naive. I think that you're 100% right. And I think that's the reason why we started, for example, why we did this podcast called In Good Faith, where we wanted Jews to be in conversation with non-Jews about the difficult discussions. But it sounds like what you're saying is Chabad is actually perfectly poised to be the global brand ambassadors for Judaism and to say, come into our shuls. You're not Jewish. I'd like to have a meaningful encounter with you, even if you're not Jewish, for me to explain to you what Judaism is by being there and to show, hey, we're actually nice people.
I don't think it's just on Chabad. I think it's on all of us.
Yeah, but yes. And I think I would be happier if more non-Chabad people were doing that. But Chabad's out there in the world and they're doing it. So maybe they should take this as a wake-up call and say, if you're not Jewish, hey, come learn about Judaism, even if we don't want to convert you. Speaking of learning about Judaism, let's move on to textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Textual healing.
Yeah. All right. We are at the end of a book, the end of Shemot. Let's have some reflections on Vayakal Pekudei or the book of Shemot. Who's going to get us started? Yedida.
So I was really sad to miss last week because I especially love Kitisa, not because it has a fabulous narrative in it, but also because I went super deep into it for my comprehensive exam. So I was sad to have missed it. But still, I am nevertheless going to give a little Dvar Torah on Vayakal Pekudei, really right from the beginning. So in the order and flow of things, God gives the instructions for building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the portable temple in the desert. And then that is interrupted by the making of the golden calf and all the drama that ensues. And then after that is resolved and Moshe gets the second set of tablets, we return to the building of the temple and Moshe giving the Israelites all of the instructions for the construction. It says that for 6 days is work to be done, but on the seventh day, there is to be holiness for you. So, Shisha Yamim Te'asa Malacha, Uvayom Hashvi Yalechem Kodesh Shabbat Shabbaton LaHashem. That it is a holy day and it is a cessation for the Lord, that it is a time when we cease from creating. And the rabbis learned from this that God gives this instruction about ceasing from creative work right before the building of the Mishkan so that we know that you don't build on the seventh day, right? All those other 6 days, you should do your work, you should be creative, you should make things, but on Shabbat, you rest. And that rest is even more important than building the sanctuary.
Nice. I think about that when I think about Heschel and the Sabbath and where he talks about sanctuaries and time. The notion that, like, you see, God basically tells us, you're about to get this physical building. And before you get this physical building, don't think that this is the only place, right? Because you have this thing, the way that Heschel calls it, the portable sanctuary throughout history, that is your sanctuary just as much, if not more, to be able to say Shabbat is there for the Jews all the time.
Very nice.
Libel, Rabbi Libel.
I have a lot of trouble with these parshiot. I don't know if it's all the years of the Torah reading, but like Truma Tetzaveh, Vayakal Pekudei, they almost spoil Shemot for me as the best book in the Bible. It kind of feels like a great movie that has kind of a subpar ending. I don't like non-narrative. So I want to just draw quick attention that this Shabbat is also one of our 4 special Shabbatot leading up to Pesach, kind of. And this one's Shabbat HaChodesh, where there's an extra Torah reading, an extra mafter, super long, that comes from another part in Exodus, in Shemot, right? Where they're preparing for the night. It's all the instructions for the night of the first Passover. And I love this Torah. This Torah reading always gets me. You did it earlier about getting in the Passover mood. This was always the moment that got me in the Passover, in the right mindset. The Passover was coming, the Pesach was coming, because it's all of the parts from the Torah that get mentioned in the Haggadah. And it's called HaChodesh because it's God saying to Moses, HaChodesh Hazeh, this is the first month. You need a calendar because later this month on the 10th day you need to take a lamb, and these are the things you need to do with the lamb. And there's so much. There's the blood on the doors. There's the way that you eat it. There's the Seder. Everything in that reading informs the Seder. And to me, even though so much has changed, like there's no mention of a scavenger hunt for the Afikoman or all these kinds of things, we've evolved it, we've turned it. How unbelievably cool is it that we still do a Seder? All these thousands of years ago, it wasn't a Seder, they were in a hurry to get out of there and run for their lives. But on the first anniversary of that, and every anniversary since, and I remember reading in one of those surveys, like the Pew survey, that even the most secular Jews, one of the most practiced things is attending some version of a Pesach Seder. Like, to me, these are the moments, like someone asked me recently to sell them on Judaism. And these are those kinds of moments that I'm just so excited to be a part of, and probably why I became a rabbi. Just this idea that, like, we're going to sit down in a few weeks and do Seders. And Jews have been doing this for thousands of years every year, and it gets laid out in the Torah. Like sometimes people say the Torah feels distant, even though we named our podcast Not in Heaven. The Torah is supposed to feel right there, and this reading for me is one of those moments where the Torah is like, wow, at our fingertips. So, but yeah, I can't do it for you, Vayakel Pekude, sorry.
We all know my thoughts on the material culture of Judaism, on all of the clothing and the buildings. And to me, this is a wonderful example of not only planning things, but the execution, right? You can't just imagine something to be beautiful. You actually have to make it sometimes. And that's why it spends all of this time to discuss the fact that, yes, it was made as it was done, as it was spoken. But what I always love is the very, very end of Pekude, right? Right before we say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, right? It's Moshe finishes the building of the Mishkan, or finishes setting it up, and then as soon as the work is finished, Vayichas ha'anan et ha'ohel moed u'chvod Hashem malei et ha'mishkan. God's presence, God's cloud fills the Mishkan, and then it tells us that whenever the cloud was, the presence of God was there, they could not move the Mishkan, and nobody could enter in the same way. And when the presence was lifted, that's when they knew that they had to move on to the next place. And it's this great little button to again remind us, right? The same way that I said, Yedid, I think about the fact that the Shabbat is there to remind us that we don't need the Mishkan. Mm-hmm. This is there to remind us that the Mishkan is there to be a vessel for divine presence. We just finished the Chet HaEgel, the sin with the calf, where we mistakenly thought that something tangible was the thing that we needed. This is something tangible, but it's not there to be that. It's just there to be a receptacle for God. And it's a great little segue right into the next book, into Vayikra, where we talk about all the things that we do in the temple, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, that one might think is actually, close to being physical, right, with the godly presence. And it's like, no, that's what's going on here, right? It's the very end of the button, and it's the fulcrum upon which we remember physicality on one side, physicality on the other side, but it's about the presence of God. That's it.
That's cool. I like how you guys can find all the joy in these stories that always used to put me to sleep in shul.
So when I chose Kitisa for one of my comprehensive parshas, I was like, oh, great, I'm going to get to learn about the golden calf. I didn't realize that there's like a full 5 or 6 aliyot before you even get to the narrative. So I was then stuck studying all this like Levitical, like in the details, in the weeds of like how you make the anointing oil and like where the sink goes and like the lineup for this and that. I actually ended up loving it and thinking it was totally fascinating. And every year I swear I'm going to go back and read it all again to refresh my memory. It's great stuff. And there is a whole internal system and logic to it, but we're totally not in touch with any of it.
The recipe for anointing oil is cool. I will tip my hat to that. That one was always caught my attention.
There is this perfumer that is making these high-end perfumes, and he has an entire line called Ketoret.
Ketoret Hasamim.
He's clearly a Sephardic individual. His name is Melul, and you see it on all these like fancy perfume stores and whatever. And he has an entire line called Ketoret. Do with that what you will. Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.